helping buyers purchase foreclosures and short sales. This will help you with everything except for listing a short sale or a foreclosure. That's another focus group we'll have to get into. But very commonly, we all have buyers that are interested in getting a great deal, working with investors, or helping a buyer with the foreclosure short sale process. So that's what this is for. Okay. First of all, the buyer's consultation. Prepare your buyers in advance.
Sure.
Yeah.
Before we start, could you, like, for someone new like me, who would be your best contacts to define foreclosures and these types of things, other than obviously your core influence and your sphere of influence, but banks, mortgage companies,
I'm not sure I understand your question.
business contacts that might be able to help you find.
To help you find foreclosures?
Yeah.
They are all listed in the multi-listing service. So you will find it in the MLS. Now, there are...
Is that where you just search under, like, what is it, REO? Or
REO, yes, REO will work, HUD will work. You can also do remark search for something that's as is or short sale. I think now most listing agents are doing a really good job of marking them as a REO. I don't know that and there is also a yes, no to is it a foreclosure or not, and they have to answer that, so yes. Now at a deep level, if you worked your way into some inner investment circles, there are some foreclosures that actually never hit the open market because they're sold investor to investor. That is not what this class is about. So that is something that you probably just have to get hooked up with an investor and plug into their circles. It is not, honestly, I probably do between 6 and 10 foreclosures a year on the buying side, and I've never gone around a bank, or I've always been able to use just what's in the MLS to look for investor deals or help a buyer, purchase a deal. So that is not necessary to have that knowledge in order to do this.
I'm only asking because I know a lot of people from my business-to-business contacts in the development community and banking.
Sure, and you can use those contacts to whatever benefits you. If that's how maybe you work your way to getting a contract for foreclosures that a bank has to offer, that's fine. But that's not necessarily where you're going to be probably finding the buyers. The buyers are going to be investors and general people that want to purchase homes. So it's not like you're going to go looking for people to buy foreclosures. What you can do though is kind of use what I call the shiny penny theory, which is I have this great home. Who knows somebody that wants this house, right? So you kind of we're in reverse of a good deal. So if I, happen to see a awesome foreclosure come up on the market, and I'm like, wow, somebody needs to get this house, then sure, I'm going to look through my database, see who my active buyers are, try to give people a call. I used to post, I haven't done this in a long time, but during the heart of the foreclosure market, I used to post Carolyn's 5 best deals. And we put that on my website, on my blog. These are our top picks for the week for best deals. So there's to give you some ideas of what to do with this stuff. Okay, so preparing your buyers in advance. So when you are anticipating that you're going to be working with a buyer that is going to be working with foreclosures, you want to make sure they're prepped. If I'm doing just a basic buyer's consultation, then I don't necessarily talk about foreclosures and short sales because it can drag out your presentation by 10 to 20 extra minutes. If the buyer is extremely focused on it, then I will, because I do want to set some expectations right up front with these buyers. And certainly, my general rhythm is I will do the buyer's consultation, have them sign the agency, get them in the car for the first appointment, and then when they're in my car and I'm driving and looking for things to talk about, that's when I might, hey, you guys, I want to, in case we run across any, foreclosures or short sales in our looks, I want to prepare you for, what that is, and then what I will tell them is basically what you're going to get in this class, okay? Don't wait until you show a buyer a foreclosure or a short sale, let them fall in love with it, and then try to get them up to speed. It's much more difficult to just to get them all the information once there's a motion and it wrapped up in it. Okay, this is a script that y'all need to memorize, and it is the price for getting a good deal on a foreclosure. It means inconvenience and additional cost that you wouldn't normally have on a traditional sale. Isn't that great? Okay, so the cost of getting a good deal is inconvenience. So Mr. Buyer, we can get you a 20% value discount over market price on a foreclosure or a short sale in today's market. However, there's going to be some inconveniences wrapped around that. Those inconveniences are and can include, and every foreclosure runs a little bit different, but rekeying locks. So here's why. So an agent that does a lot of foreclosures, and Claudia, I'm gonna pick on Matt because he does a lot of foreclosures, and he's in our office. So if you guys want the down low on some great foreclosures, Matt's a good person to talk
And I
to.
sell
Claudia as well.
probably 90% foreclosures, so that's no.
Yeah, so Claudia is an expert.
Can you get a copy of this PowerPoint?
Yes. So it'll be on a video actually, on
Oh,
the
what?
video that I'm taping.
Oh, okay.
But yes. So one of them is rekeying locks. So here's what happens. A foreclosure listing agent is going to get multiple properties generally at once. So they may get a batch of properties every week or every 2 weeks, just depending on when the bank hands them over. It is the listing agent's responsibility to make sure that the properties are prepped for sale. There may be clean out involved from the actual eviction of the seller. There may be hazards that need to be cleaned up, such as an oil spill in the garage, or a missing handrail or railing on the front on a very steep set of stairs. The bank may even decide to go ahead and remove like really nasty carpet and go ahead and replace it. They may decide to go ahead and paint the home, or they may make some minor repairs to the home just to get it in a better sales condition. If the bank feels like that is to their benefit, to spend a couple of grand in order to make 10 more, then they may very well do that. So the listing agent's responsibility is to do an evaluation of that property and then get a whole bunch of contractors through that property to clean it out, do any minor repairs, and do any upgrades. So they'll want to put that lock, or they'll want to put the house on a lockbox, but so that the contractors don't have to hassle with all of the combinations and codes for every single house, they'll generally have a master key. So what's going to happen is when that property sells, they want to get that lock set off of that door so they can take it to the next property so that they don't have to keep buying lock sets. But that is at the inconvenience of your buyer having to pay to rekey those locks. Now, not every foreclosure listing charges a rekey fee, but I would say probably 80% of them do. And then you're going to tell your buyer, the foreclosure bank and/or listing agent has just rekeyed the locks for you right before close, and I'm going to tell you to do it one more time. Because you still don't really know who changed those locks. If you don't know. I mean, I trust you guys because I know who's doing it, but there are agents out there that might just send some handyman to go change a lock and you just don't know. Also, I have had it happen where a agent, and it wasn't Matt, by the way, but an agent had listed a foreclosure and they didn't change the locks, but they didn't mark it as sold in MLS. It was under backup status, so someone was still able to come and access the property doing a showing, and surprised the homeowner on the first day that they were moving in. So it's just a good idea, change the locks, just make sure everything's good. Yes, you're paying twice for it, and generally when they change the lock sets aren't pretty. They're gonna use the brassiest, cheap lock set. They're not gonna put on really nice ones, especially if it's a nicer home. So just be prepared. This is just inconvenience that your buyer's gonna have to suffer through. The other thing is gonna be turning on utilities for inspections and or appraisal. So again, every foreclosure bank has a different set of rules of how they handle this. Some agents and some banks will just leave all utilities on, make sure that the property's functioning, and will leave it on for your inspections. Some will turn everything off but the electricity so that you can at least see, get in and out, and have air conditioning in the summer and or maybe heat in the winter, but then not have water or gas on. So once you complete the sale, you and the listing agent or their assistant should be having a dialogue about what is the policy for turning on utilities and what's needed. Some banks will do it for you. Everything's off, but they'll turn it on for you as long as you give them an advance warning on the date. And some banks won't. It's 100% your buyer's responsibility. Most municipalities in our area will allow the buyer to do a temporary turn on, whether it be for 24, 48, or 72 hours, so that they have time to get the inspections done and then cut off the utilities so the buyer isn't paying for those utilities throughout the time that you're in escrow. That is a pain in the butt when you also need to get an appraiser through the property. If the buyer's lender is going to require that the power be on, and most of them are doing that, even conventional loans are requiring it, then you're gonna have to make sure those utilities are back on or still on when the appraiser comes to the property. So I try my very best to coordinate with the date of inspection and having the appraisal set so that the appraisal happens right after the inspection or the day after, once we know we are gonna go ahead and complete the sale. Yes?
Just to add, because I worked in Missouri gas industry for a couple of years, you want to tell them to ask about fees, because like they charge $32 to turn you on, but if you're off for less than 6 months, they're going to charge you $65 to turn it on. So sometimes it's better to leave it on.
Sometimes it's better to leave it on. Okay, well, that's good. That's good. Yeah, that's
That's a
good.
lot of fun costs.
Yes, it is. And I've had a buyer actually leave utilities on for other reasons on a short sale, which I'll get into in a minute, where they just chose to maintain the utilities and the heat and the air conditioning on in the house. So, did you have your hand up? Oh, okay, all right. So yes, so be prepared for that as well. De-winterizing and re-winterizing fees, especially as we get into this time of year, banks, as they get these foreclosures, are going to start winterizing the properties, turning off all the water, flushing out the system, maybe putting antifreeze down the pipes. If your buyer comes in and does inspections, the bank may have a policy that they will want to de-winterize the property and then re-winterize it after the inspections are complete. Again, something else that has to be coordinated with your appraisal and your inspection, if everything needs to be operating and functional. So the winterization fees can be, it depends on how many faucets and sinks and outlets there are to be winterized, but typically $150 to $300 is the average fee to the buyer to winterize a property. And again, that'll be coordinated between you and the listing agent and or their assistant, or HUD, which when you're doing a HUD deal, you'll be talking directly to the people that actually come out and do the winterization, their contractor. So you'll have to have a dialogue about that, so just make a note that I'll have to remember to ask about winterization, de-winterization. Because the bank does not want to take a chance that your buyer does the inspection, not have it re-winterized, and then we have a cold snap and the pipes freeze and break in the day of walkthrough, there's a big mess for the day of closing. So that's why. Again, some foreclosures will do that for you as free of charge to your buyer, others charge. So again, these are questions that if you're about to write the offer and you're fortunate enough to be able to talk to the listing agent ahead of time, these would be good questions to ask. If not, generally look in the supplements in MLS. Most good foreclosure agents will have an instruction sheet or a policy sheet of what fees are common to be charged. So. Penalties for closing delays. This is something that's kind of relaxed, except for HUD. Hasn't really relaxed on this, but I've seen less and less penalties for the buyer not making a closing date, as long as it's reasonable, or it's a no fault, direct fault of the buyer. But it used to be written into a lot of the contracts that would be like $50 to $100 a day for every day the buyer didn't close on time. So read those policies, read those contracts carefully, but a lot of the banks have just kind of done away with that. They may do an extension fee in order to extend. HUD is like that. They'll charge you, I think it's $350 to do a 2-week extension, and that has to be paid up front at the time you do the extension on it, otherwise the deal will be canceled. So again, just know that this is out there. You don't necessarily have to be the expert at this, just know that this stuff exists so that you can go track it down or just ask good questions when you do have a buyer in your car. Okay, additional title work examination if desired. So what's going to happen with a lot of the foreclosures is they're gonna tell you who's going to be providing title insurance, just literally like any other transaction. But in many cases, if your buyer chooses to close with a different title company, they can do that, but the bank will not pay for any title insurance whatsoever or closing fees. Many times if you just close where they're closing, then all of that is provided and there's no charge extra to the buyer except for their title mortgagee insurance for the mortgage company to be added. So again, just good questions to ask your buyer if they have experience at buying foreclosures. They may want to have a second set of eyes or their own title company provide that insurance. Also know that could cause a delay. In order for that a title to be examined, many times titles are cleared at the closing table. So they have a list of things that need to be done in order to exchange the property free and clear. So if the second title company comes in and examines the title, there's going to be a lot of defaults on the title, things that haven't been cleared up from the foreclosure, like HOA dues or financing statements or other things like that. But it is, it's totally your buyer's choice. I always tell the buyer that that's their option. I've probably only had one or two in my career actually take me up on that and have a separate title company look over the title. So, okay. If your buyer is an FHA buyer or is using any grant program to get down payment assistance, and bless you, it is unlikely that a foreclosure will actually work for them. There are exceptions. Every once in a while you are going to find a foreclosure that really just needs sweat equity, paint, carpet, and a few little minor things, but they're rare. The majority of foreclosures out there need a lot more work, and a lot of times FHA, there's no way you'll get around it. Banks will not necessarily make a property available for FHA financing, some will. So look on the MLS sheet itself. If the bank is FHA friendly or they think that the house will pass or they're willing to bring the house up to code to pass, it'll say, under the financing at the very bottom of the sheet, it'll say FHA okay. With the cash conventional, FHA will be listed on there. So then you'll know it's okay to bring your FHA buyer. If you don't see that on there, most agents are good enough in this market right now about putting that on there if it's good. And if you see a foreclosure and it's not listed on there, there's probably a reason. It's not because the agent has forgotten. It's because it's probably a dog. You're gonna get, so if you go into a house and you see mold, you see horrible bad leaking foundation, you see that maybe pipes have been stolen, copper in a lot of these foreclosures, air conditioner units will be taken, hot water tanks, you'll see all kinds of things that'll be missing. That's always the first thing you should do whenever you go into a vacant property is check if they like it, check the plumbing, what you can see to the furnace. If there has been theft, you're usually above the hot water tank, there will be cut away pipe, and that's your cue that there's been some issues. If you see that, you're not going to be able to get the water on, so it's now not going to pass most loans. You're going to have to either do a construction loan or do a cash sale with that particular buyer, and then they may not have the ability to do that. Okay, and I would just never show a buyer of any foreclosure that's not FHA noted, and I teach them, because they can see that on their version of the MLS when they get their client portal, they can see the financing in the will sell section, and I show them how to read that. All right, HomePath renovation financing is available through some of the HomePath branded foreclosures. That means that the buyer can borrow some extra funds in order to make the house right or make it past FHA financing. So for instance, in the house that we go in and it's missing plumbing and maybe it's got a hole in the roof and it needs carpet and some appliances, there is a dollar limit to how much you can borrow, but there is the ability to be able to take out some additional money as they do the loan in order to do the renovations that need to be completed. However, just like taking out a second loan or equity line of credit, it's going to have a higher interest rate, and there's going to be some other inspections that are going to be required, and it's going to be a longer escrow closing period. So if your buyers are in a hurry, don't mess with any of that. I usually lose a buyer on HomePath financing because of the interest rates and fees. So they really have to have a love of getting a really good deal to want to get into the property. The typical buyer that has no cash in pocket, is very budgeted, isn't likely going to like the home path financing, but you can certainly have them talk to a participating lender. Not every lender does that type of loan. Do you have a good resource for who does
I
that?
do have, well, prime lending, Bruce Brown can, I don't know if he does renovation, he does home path.
Okay.
But there's a guy in Lawrence, and anybody can come to me, I forget his name, but he, in fact, as many as I've sold, I've done mine.
Yeah.
And he got it through. And it was a smooth deal, but, you know, she had the time to wait and get it done.
Yeah, I've done 2, and so in 10 years, woo.
But you have to use their contractors, and,
Yeah.
and you have to point that out, because people think, oh, yeah, I know, and I can get this work done and get receipts.
No.
So.
Yeah, the buyer has to have the work hired out, and they have to be licensed permitted people that are approved with
Through
HOPAT.
HOPAT, yeah.
Yeah, and same thing with the 203K loans. It's a very similar concept. It's just not a branded loan, but it's the same thing. Actually, you're going to have higher fees, inspections, additional inspections, and you have to use their contractor. There is a Wells Fargo has a product. I think they still have it. That's called. The short term is a 203K Express, but they have a special name for it, where they have the buyer doesn't have to go get the bids. The buyer just gives a list of what they want done. They'll send the appraiser out to the property with the list of things that would need to be complied with for FHA financing if that's something's wrong, like a railing's missing or something like that. And that contractor is trained to know what is done. It's one-stop shopping. So that's kind of like today in the insurance world, when you drive a car and you have a wreck, you just take it to whatever approved place. You don't have to get bids anymore. They just do the work as long as it's an approved vendor. Same thing with this Wells Fargo product. And so they call it 203K Express, but it has some sort of a sexier name. Typically, the contractors are approved through Lowe's or Home Depot, but there are some local guys, like my builder friend Luke is on that list. He's a whole house remodeler and builder, and so he is on that list. But again, it's just usually not the most attractive rates, fees, hassle to do something like that. We talked about FHA loans. This is just a nice kind of quick list of things that need to be done or cannot be existing in an FHA in a home. In other words, let me try that again. If you see these things, the home is not going to go FHA. So if you see a leaking or bad roof, excessive mold, standing water in the home, broken sinks, pipes, exposed wiring, out-of-date electrical, peeling paint, broken glass, unsecured doors, that's going to stop your FHA loan from getting approved. And on any house, not just foreclosures.
Is that simply just due to the expenses they're looking at and what it would take to get it to a feasible shape?
It's because whenever you're doing something with a government loan, they're going to expect things to be in a certain condition before they're going to want to really lend money. So they don't want to necessarily lend money to a buyer at a cut rate, which is kind of what they're doing, and then have the asset never get remodeled or rehabbed, or have the buyer have an accident, get sick, and then come back and sue the lender. Like there's a lot of reasons for it, but yeah, they just want the house to prove certain standards so that they know the home the buyer is getting is going to be a good one for them.
So it doesn't matter if those things get fixed after the inspection?
Well, you would want those things to be, like on a regular traditional sale, if you saw some of those things, you had inspections, got them fixed, then send the appraiser out, that's fine, but you have to have a seller that's willing to do those things. With most foreclosures, if it's not listed FHA okay on the listing, then they're not willing to fix those things. You cannot, a foreclosure will not fix anything. So you're stuck with the way it is, and they will not let your buyer go in and fix it either. So you are stuck with the house in the condition that it's in, and don't mess around with that because it's $250,000 fine and loss of license. So don't ever alter a foreclosure. Yeah.
And essentially the banks, they're not in the contracting industry, so they don't want anything to do with that, so they generally won't do anything. to the
Right, they
process.
just want to sell it as is, take it or leave it. They'll take their loss on the price hit if that's what it takes to sell the house. They just don't want anybody going in there and messing around with stuff and screwing stuff up worse. So, okay, do a good walkthrough of the home with the buyers during daylight hours. So if you go out at dusk and you're looking at properties, especially when we get into the fall time of year, meet a buyer at 5 o'clock, it's already dark. So you're looking at properties like that, go back in the morning and the daylight and just take a good look at the house in daylight hours. You'd be surprised how things look differently between night and day. Also, just a little sneaky trick is that because agents are, will list short sales, or sometimes a seller before they get foreclosed on will be trying to sell the home. Sometimes if the prior listing agent doesn't pull down the disclosures, but old disclosures might be on MLS from when the actual seller lived in the home. Now that's not a promise, you can't always find that, but every once in a while, if you just look at the history, look at the listing, see if you can find those disclosures, at least you're giving your buyer something that is easy for you to have access to as to any condition of the home. So just a little thought for you. Banks may not have utilities on, so bring flashlights if you're showing at night. Be prepared for mold, water in the basements, and just craziness in general. I mean, some of the craziest adventures I've had have been in foreclosures.
You can literally walk into water a foot deep in the basement if you're not careful.
Yes.
You need to really, I won't even show them at night.
Yeah. It's dangerous. Like you definitely want to be with people you trust. You're going to a foreclosure at night. Or I just don't go in the basement. I'll have the buyer lead. Actually did that once with an investor and his 24-year-old son that helped him flip houses. And we were in a tri-level and I had a flashlight and it was during the day, it was just kind of dark in this basement. And I started to go first and just, I knew these people and the son's like, oh, I'll get it. I'll see if there's a light down there. And I was shining the flashlight. Well, the water was so murky that you couldn't see, you didn't have a reflection. So it looked like it was just the floor. And like he's like, bing, boom, 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 ching. And all of a sudden he's like, splash. And he was up to his knees. And I don't know what, but it was something. And I was like,
That's happened to a lot of people.
so I was like, thank God it wasn't me. So anyway, yeah. Also, don't trust railings, don't trust decks, just be really cautious about stuff. I mean, listing agents will do a pretty good job of, trying to make sure things are secure, but every once in a while you'll get into one and the deck is kind of shaky and, just be really careful. And especially, hopefully your clients aren't bringing kids, but if they've got little kids, keep them real close because you just never know what you're going to find. Also know that sometimes you'll run into homeless.
That's what I was going to say, that
They'll run into homeless people will take, especially in the wintertime, they'll, find an unlocked door and hole up in the basement. They don't generally mean you harm, but you'll walk into a house and you'll hear the back door. So, or something out in the basement, and sometimes you'll see a blanket or something when you can see that. So just be real careful. It doesn't happen as much up north, but it can still happen, so just be careful with what you're doing. All right, make sure your buyer's lender knows that you are writing an offer on a foreclosure. So if all things are good, your buyer's moving forward, make sure your lender knows that and double check with your lender on, do we need to have utilities on for the appraisal? Is the underwriter going to require that? And don't just accept the loan person, the nice person that takes the application. Have them verify with underwriting if they're not seasoned enough to make sure, yes or no, that they answered that question. In my experience, in the last 6 months, the answer is always yes, even on conventional mortgages. They want to see utilities on. Doesn't all have to be working properly, but they at least want to see things running. And again, just another reminder about that appraisal timing and just making sure that the utilities are on for that appraiser. And again, it may require your buyer to pay an appraisal fee before you know that you're moving forward on inspections. But again, this is just one of those little inconvenient things that the buyer's going to have to suffer through if they want to try to go after a good deal. If you're working with a very seasoned investor, the investor may not even decide to do inspections. If they have enough wherewithal that they can eyeball a property, or, you know, if we can just get the utilities on, they'll kind of see what needs to be done. Or maybe they're just gonna gut everything anyway, so it kind of doesn't matter, as long as the structure looks good and the roof, they're just gonna move forward anyway. It kind of depends, so then that's not really an issue. And if you're working for an investor, typically they're either paying cash, so an appraisal isn't necessary, or they're doing a construction loan. And yes, that bank is going to do an appraisal, but they don't necessarily need water on. All they're doing is what's the value now versus what's the value if we did a certain list of improvements, and they're just trying to justify that the loan that they're about to make will cover or be much less than the ultimate value of the home, so that they can get paid back. Yes.
Does the bank, do they frown on the investors saying, even though they already know that the house is a foreclosure, so it's not gonna be in the best of shape, there's gonna be some things wrong with it, but the investor will say, I wanna write the contract contingent upon, you know, my inspection, and if I think there's just way too much work, then I don't want it. So when you if you write up a contract like that, I mean, does the bank, will they immediately turn that down, or?
When you say bank, you mean seller bank?
Yeah.
Okay. No. In fact, I still have a flipper that we've probably done 4 or 5 deals together. He still asks for a small inspection period. He's not gonna take 10 days, but if he feels like he wants to get a subcontractor in to give him a bid for a couple of projects, try to get that done before we make the offers in the first place, just so he knows what the money value is. But every once in a while, if it can't happen, we'll go ahead and guess at it and then make the offer and then have the contractor come in during the 2 or 3 day inspection period that he asks for. So that, it just kind of depends on the investor and what their comfort level is. But yes, now on HUD, if you're doing a HUD home, investors can take the inspection period, but they lose earnest.
That's what I thought.
I think they do. I think they lose earnest if they back out.
Okay.
Which is, it's typically gonna be $500, and most investors will be like, oh, that's fine, whatever, just don't want that crazy house. But just know that they might lose that. Now, I have gotten an investor money back. I don't remember how that happened. I was shocked. I was like, cash that check now. I was like, just get it back and just get out. So, and I don't remember why that happened. I know there was a weird circumstance to it. But anyway, but for the most part, just prepare them for that. But they can take the inspection period. Other banks, just a regular home pack, meaning a regular bank straight foreclosure, they will absolutely give your investor money back as long as they follow the timelines. But there is a negotiating strategy to lessening those timelines and or eliminating them. Because the bank's gonna feel a lot more comfy with an investor that will do no inspections and pays cash than they are with a buyer that might pay them more money but wants an inspection period. So sometimes you may be competing on a foreclosure, and let's just for easy math, it's $100,000, and your buyer bids, you're in a war, and your buyer bids $105 and asks for a 10-day inspection and is getting financing. But an investor comes in and offers a $95 cash, no inspections, closes in a week. You see it closing MLS for $95, and you're like, well, that sucks because, you know, my buyer was willing to give him $10,000 more. Didn't that mean anything? No, it didn't. You know, not necessarily. So every bank's going to handle that situation a little bit differently, but knowing sometimes it's not always about money. It's about the ease of the deal and you know, getting it done. And if they feel like the buyer is a first-time buyer that's going to be a little wishy-washy on some of the condition issues, they may feel more comfortable with the savvy investor. So not that that will always happen to you, but just know that that could. Claudia, do you have any other thoughts about?
No, not really. That happens, and it's irritating.
It is.
Because you have a contract in there that's really good, and somebody else gets it and closes for a lot less.
Yeah.
But those people at a bank, they might have 700 houses that they deal with every day. You know, just Fannie Mae, because you go in and you have to download your contract and you download people's names into their site. And as it goes down, it shows bottom line on what they're gonna make, and that's all they look at.
Yeah.
You know, that's all they look at, I think, when they're looking at those, so.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it depends on the bank. It depends on who it is and how, you know, what their systems are and how much they care.
Well, investors are easier to deal with.
Typically they
They've been
are.
down this road so many times.
So sometimes.
Sometimes.
Sometimes they are.
Most of the times they are, especially a cash deal. It's
Yeah.
no inspection, cash deal, you're just show them once and you're done pretty much.
Yeah. The
But, and other
problem
ones
is,
aren't.
yeah, when you get an investor that looks for bottom feeding only, like, so something will be listed for 100 and the investor wants you to write the offer for 50. You know, it's like, they're not gonna get that deal, but they're just looking to throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. When you work for an investor like that, you're gonna be doing a lot of work for not very much return. Now, I prefer to get in the league with people that I know are flipping, are doing good deals, they're not, I mean, yes, we wanna get them the best price, don't get me wrong, but we're not just blindly writing up offers on properties that they've never seen or they're sending you to go in and take pictures because they're out of state or, wherever. Our area gets preyed on a lot by out-of-state investors because Kansas City has some of the cheapest housing per dollar available in the country. I think it's like top 5, or it has been in the last couple of years. So investors that take their little California money or coastal money or Canada money and then come down here and they see in the MLS, oh, we can buy a whole bunch of property for $5,000, a mile from downtown. Cool. And of course, that's all it's worth, right? It's never going to sell for more, but they get this idea that they're going to flip something and sell it for $100,000 in a neighborhood that would never sell for that. They don't always do their due diligence. I have a coaching client that has fallen in league with such a type of an investment company, and he is handling the listings. And it was determined that this company, he didn't do the buying side with them, but it was determined that they were using their value judgments based off of Zillow's estimate. And so now he's listing property that's way overpriced because they didn't have an agent really behind the scenes doing a proper CMA for them. They were just having them write offers for them on properties that they had targeted as being a big deal.
And they'll call you and they want you to put an offer on 25 properties and they're all lowball. You can spend so much time where your time would be better off working on finding somebody in the area, that just be careful with those.
Yes.
They call and they make it sound all rosy.
Mm-hmm.
And they're using you to do all the footwork and all the groundwork and you're just, finally, what I tell them when they do that is that, yeah, I can do that, but I'm gonna charge so much per property, and then they don't want you.
Mm-hmm.
You're gone.
Yes.
Fast.
Or just ask them to sign a buyer agency. That'll scare a lot of them away because they don't want to be tied to one person because they know that you're going to get tired of their crap and want to move on. So
Yeah, I think saying that you charge for that, or, when there's so many offers.
right,
because-
right. Because here's the other deal anyway is that Mr. Investor, I cannot give you the value advice that I know you're going to require to make smart money decisions without being able to give you that value advice. Do you really want to buy stock without having an advisor help you with insider trading? No, you don't want to do that, right? So why not empower me to work for you to my best ability to help you with your decisions? And they won't do it only because they want to throw spaghetti on the wall. I don't care. They think they know everything and they just want to use you. Or they'll use you to get the value and then move on. So.
You become an unpaid consultant.
Yes.
Correct.
You can tell when they've had a seminar, like in San Francisco, or in Los Angeles, or in Las Vegas, because you'll start getting those calls from people that they say Kansas City's a great market, and so you start getting these calls, and you might get 10, that these people are they're out to get those good deals. You buy them sight unseen, they're great deals, you just flip them, and oh my. I had a lady call me one time on a house that she got, and it was like, for some reason I've been on that street, and I usually don't go on that street. And I'd been there, and I knew that that was a total tear down. She thought she got a real prize. She had to pay the taxes, she was gonna have to pay the tear down, and so what if you got it for $100 and it's gonna cost you $10,000 to get rid of it?
Right.
And you'll never sell the lot. So you'll always have those taxes.
Yeah, they just don't do their due diligence on what they're buying into. They just don't have the perception that property is as cheap as it is. So, okay, right. Writing the offer. Most of the time, the only time this will not be true is with HUD. HUD has its own process. But any other time, you're gonna write the offer on the standard KCRAR forms like you would any other deal. And then you're gonna check the MLS in the supplements area, and there will be typically a series of addendums. And the addendums can be as many as 40 to 50 pages. I just did a deal, and I swear the whole packet was like this. I mean, it was like 70 some pages all together with everything it needed to be signed. Every single form will have to be almost initialed, and even if they don't ask for it, sometimes I initial it anyway, because it's just a pain to have to go back and get it later. You cannot change anything on the bank's forms. Don't cross it out, don't initial, don't do anything. They have to take the language as it sits. If you try to change anything, the bank will reject your offer. And the initial every page, and even the signature page. I think it's the Fannie Mae form. Even the signature page has to be initialed. So, just really be careful and just read everything very carefully. Do not become an attorney. Do not start interpreting these forms. If your buyer does not understand them, ask them to consult an attorney or go get billed for some help, or broker. Don't to put yourself in the judgment seat of, well, this is what this means, because if you're wrong, your buyer's going to be mad at you if it comes back to get them. So just, tell the buyer, everybody has to sign a whole bunch of confusing forms. I can summarize it for you. You're going to not be able to alter the property before closing. You're buying the property as is, and you cannot sue the bank for any reason should the property not meet your standards after you move in. By the way, you're buying the property as is, you can't touch the property before you close, and you can't sue the bank. And by the way, it says this like multiple times in multiple different ways throughout this contract. So that's what I tell the buyer. So basically it says this, read it for detail, because there's a lot of policies and a lot of little, language in there. I want you to be comfortable with it, and then I'll just set it in front of them and let them decide if they want to read it for detail. Certainly give them a copy.
And if my memory serves, that could also get you in trouble with Merck if you do that.
Do what? Interpret the contract?
Right.
Yes, that is correct. We are not lawyers.
Right.
So.
Or environmentalist or.
That's right, or inspectors or anything else. All right. Buyers will, after they sign everything and you submit the offer, different foreclosure companies have different methods of which they would like their offers to be submitted. But I think for the most part, most of them are just email the listing agent, or there will be an online entrance portal. Those instructions will be in the supplements or in the agent instructions within the MLS. Fannie Mae has gone online for the most part. HomePath Fannie Mae
Yeah,
is online.
I did an REO Genesis the other day, first time I ever did that, and it was pretty simple.
Yes, that's the one that I have going right now, is REO Genesis. And that was the first time I had kind of messed with that, so that was good. Was it Kim? Kimberly Killian?
No,
Down in the Summit? Okay. Just listing agent.
he's, I bought from him before, he does a lot of VA, and I think this one was Freddie Mac, maybe.
Wow.
But it was REO Genesis, I'm not sure, I can't remember.
Okay, yeah, and Kimberly has a lot of them. So just, you're gonna have to suffer through reading for detail and just following instructions. None of the submissions are difficult, but let me also caution you this. Please make sure that you have everything signed and a check in hand before you submit any offer online. So just best practice is to always have yourself backed up. Just because it's an online submission doesn't give you permission not to have all the paperwork signed, earnest check in hand, pre-approval forms, all of that. Don't cheat the system, because you can get caught. HUD is actually has the right, they change their policies to where they can come in and audit our files to see if offers submitted actually have written offers as backup in the system. So if you do a HUD deal, I still have them sign it, get a copy of the check, and I put it in .loop. And that way I've got a copy that, yes, I had a signed contract in order to authorize putting that in HUD, in the system. Banks will discount usually, but not always. I generally see maybe a 5 to 10% swing with banks. However, the market is changing and it's getting competitive out there because there's not as many foreclosures, and the investors and people that are looking for good deals are starting to pile on these things. Our foreclosure rate and our short sale rate is starting to slow down. So a lot of times what you're gonna get is best and final. I don't think I've made an offer on a foreclosure in the past 3 months that hasn't had a best and final call. So what that means is that more than one offer has come in. The listing agent typically will put everybody on notice. So you 3 made offers, then we're gonna come back and tell all 3 of you, best and final, I need your best offers by 5 o'clock on Wednesday, okay? Now, if your buyer wants to up his offer or change his offer in any way, or her offer, there's sometimes a simple form, sometimes just an email will suffice, and sometimes you have to start all over. Kind of depends on the foreclosure company. And then you'll submit that best and final and then hope for the best. Now, I will tell you, best and final doesn't always mean you have to go over sales price. I had an investor draw a line in the sand on not going over this much. It was still $8,000 under list price, and I'm like, I don't think you're gonna get it, but we'll do it. We'll throw it in there, and sure enough, we win. So again, I don't know if it's because maybe the other person bid more, but they wanted inspections, or was it buyer with an FHA loan? I mean, who knows why it happened, but it happened, and we were thrilled. So just be prepared about that best and final, and prep your buyer for that up front so that they're not shocked and upset after the fact. So just say, in today's market, it's very common that we'll make an offer and somebody else will be right in behind us. Because what's the truth? The truth is that once a property is, even if it's sat on the market for 6 months, once a property reaches a certain price point that makes it really attractive, the numbers work for an investor or for a buyer. They work for every investor, right? They work for every buyer. So once that $100,000 house is priced at $80,000 and it only needs $5,000 worth of repair, that's a deal, right? There's profit in that. So every investor is going to be interested in that property, and that's how these things kind of come about. Same thing with like a normal resale. So you say you've got a $200,000 house in, I don't know, the middle section of Benson Place, right? $200,000 would be a fabulous deal for the middle of that neighborhood, which generally runs to $225,000 to $250,000. So once that price gets down to where it's the most awesome thing that's available for $200,000, everybody's going to pile on. Make sense? Okay. Okay, banks sometimes, most of the time, will not accept digital signatures. So you cannot use .loop to acquire your signatures. Some banks will, some won't. Ask before you assume. HUD, definitely not. Will not work. And some require original forms. The REI Genesis one I did, she's down, the property's in Liberty, she's down in South Lee Summit. I had to drive those 70-some pages to her within 24 hours of acceptance. So I didn't even have time to digest it. We just had to run it down there. So just ask the listing agent, or there should be instructions if they're going to require original forms. And some of them want it in black ink and some of them want it in blue ink. So just read for detail or ask questions. All right, EMD. This can be a personal check for when you're making your initial offer, but almost every single bank will require it to be replaced with certified funds. The only exception to this is HUD. That will not work with HUD. You need to have a certified funds check in your hand. There are minimum earnest requirements for most foreclosures. It'll usually tell you in the MLS. I see 1% is very common, or 1% or $1,000, whichever greater, cheapest, or whatever. You must have a pre-approval for the offer to be reviewed, and cash offers must have cash verification. Cash verification can simply be a letter from their bank stating Bob Jones has $500,000 to, and, buy this $500,000 property, cash available, whatever it is. They can also get a copy, like a screenshot or a copy of their bank statement. They can black out like the last couple of digits of their bank account or any other numbers that are personal, but they need to leave the balance number so that they can see that.
But they also need to make sure when they give those, everyone I've had, it has their name and address
Name and
on
address.
their bank
Okay.
statement. And I've had people use their retirement statements. They don't care where the money's coming from. So if they don't, if there's trouble getting anything else, just give me a copy of that.
Yeah, that's good, that's good. So, and I make that requirement on cash before I even take an investor in the car, especially if I'm meeting them for the first time and I don't know them. I had a buyer that called me on a property I have that's kind of value priced in the Hickman area, and she told me that she had cash funds, and I said, oh great, how did you come across the cash? And she said, oh, I was in a lawsuit. Oh great, so do you have the money? Well, not yet, we're supposed to get the check this week. And I've heard that one a lot. So I'm like, great, so what I'm gonna need, and I just blamed it on the seller. I said the seller, wants to make sure that only pre-approved, buyers and cash verified buyers are actually looking at the home. Love to help you, so what I need is, once that check hits your account, I'm gonna need to see your bank statement, and I'm gonna need you to bring me a copy of that at our first appointment. And sure enough, she got the check last Thursday and sent me a copy of her statement, so I met her on Friday. And I got a new buyer. So that was pretty cool. But again, it's just, never just run out and assume anything to be true. Just, blame it on Bill. My broker requires this. And if you guys are having problems standing up for yourselves, blame Bill or, blame the seller. Because I guarantee you, if you ask the seller, do you only want pre-approved people to come through their home? What are they going to say? Well, yeah, right? So that's your job. Okay, use the title company to verify funds if you need. So this happened to John Harris. When he first started, and I was coaching John, he had, I don't remember how he got the lead, if it was just, I don't remember how it came in, that the guy wanted to buy a house, he had cash $60,000. So John said, great, I'm just gonna need you to verify that. The guy said, no problem, I'll meet you at the office. So John has the guy meet us at the office, and he lit this guy, John says, okay, you got your cash verification? The guy says, yeah, it's right here in my back pocket. Pulls out his wallet and slaps down 3 $20,000 cashier's checks from his bank to make this, like, he's literally carrying $60,000 verified funds in his pocket. So John brings me these I come sit in my office, John, I said, Carolyn, I don't know what to do. And I was like, well, why don't we ask the title company to verify them? Because he was worried that they weren't real. So why would this guy be carrying around $60,000 in his pocket? So the title company actually called bank and verified the I don't know how they did it, but they verified that the cashier's checks were legit. And so it turns out John not only sold this guy one property, but sold him 3 because he was looking at independence and wanted to, and when he found out he could buy a couple of properties with that 60 grand, the guy's like, well, I can get a couple of rentals and make money on my money, this will be awesome. And so John sold him 3 houses, and that's also how John learned to do a minimum commission. So the first one that he got paid like $400 on, he was like, this sucks, so how do I fix this? And I'm like, well, tell your investor you have a minimum and write it into the next buyer agency that you do with him. And they did, and the guy complied, so anyway. All right, don't be sloppy. Foreclosure agents and their staff have tons of rules that they have to follow, and they tend to sound like first grade teachers. I was thinking of Jackie when I think of this. And because she was very, this needs to be done. All right, so make sure that things are dated, make sure things are initialed, review back your forms, make sure things are legible, read instructions. It's hard for us high-I salesy people to follow instructions, but you really need to do that.
And most agents will have that sheet, like we said, an MLS, and it's got the instructions. And there might be something on there like their 7th thing. Be sure to look at paragraph 18 on page so-and-so, because and the reason they do that is because everybody forgets to sign it. Then you have to go back to your buyers. There's a reason why they put all those things on there, is because they've been through it so many times with having to get back to the agent, send everything back, have it initialed. It's just, causes time.
Yep, it's a pain in the butt. And there's something I learned from Matt when I helped him and an assistant get into .live, was that things have to be turned in a certain order to the bank. So when they get your offer, they have to put things in a certain contract order before the bank will even take a look at the forms. So I found that very interesting. It's like, oh man, you know.
There's a lot of rules too.
So yeah, it's not, you know, just all rosy on their side of the fence.
Expense. It's can be a nightmare.
Yeah, you need a couple of assistants. If you're gonna do foreclosures at a high level like Matt does, you have to have help. You have to have a runner, you've gotta have a good contractor you can rely on, you've gotta have great assistants, you've gotta have a good buyer's agent that can field calls, because that really is the magic of having these foreclosures. You are gonna get a lot of buyer leads, some of them are gonna be a little sketchy, but you're gonna get them. And you gotta weed through them, you gotta have somebody to do that. You will wear yourself out trying to do it on your own. That's leverage is key. Also expenses, having some cash in your pocket so that you can front some of the bills. The banks will certainly, you know, reimburse, but I know
It's not uncommon that Matt has to run out and pay $1,000 to, you know, the city, somewhere else, you know, I mean, and like that.
Yes. I remember the Benitez, which is another husband-wife team, they actually were, I won't say victims, but they lost everything in Hurricane Andrew in Florida. They relocated up here and rebuilt their real estate business, and one of the things they got into was foreclosures. And I remember Wanda telling me at one time she had $40,000 in receivables between everything that they had paid for, between utility bills and, you know, cleanups and trash dumpsters and, you know, the contractors and this and that, you know, that the banks will all reimburse them for, but they had to front that money in order to get reimbursed. So, I mean, it's not a happy life. As you know, it can be a very affluent life, but it takes a lot of organization. You got to have really good systems. So, you know, if you're gonna want to, you know, branch into this, just know there are some good. There's good and there's bad. So.
Sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It can be. It can be. You got to have it together. So that is.
I've been working a year and a half on utility bills.
Have you?
I've got them down to where we're right on, you know, but it was a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
I'm mom, and that's free help.
Yeah. So this is just kind of, you know, a slideshow just stating what we just said. So I'm not going to read that one to you, but it is. And, you know, be nice. Be nice to these people. Because sometimes you are going to call and the agent doesn't want to talk to you. You're talking to their assistant. The assistant doesn't know anything, or maybe the assistant does know everything. And remember, the assistant may be running the show. And so they may be the one that submits your offer. They may be the one that talks to the asset manager to present offers if there is a verbal conversation happening behind it. So be nice, because that agent might just pick your offer based on the fact that they've worked with you before, you're easy to co-op with, and you know what you're doing. So just be nice, okay? I have done that on a short sale 2 different times with a particular co-op agent that knows I can get a deal done, and then I'm going to stick, my buyer is good because I'm going to educate them, we're going to stick with the process, and they're not going to fail. And so whenever I've been competing on a short sale, he will pick me every time because he knows I will get it done, right? So just be nice. All right, remember, seller, bank, will not make any repairs. I have likely, because there will be 1 in 1,000 where the bank will actually fix something for you. I had that happen on an inspection where the water pipe to the outside spigot busted when we turned on the water. And I called the co-op agent. I was like, yeah, we really weren't able to finish our inspections because of this busted thing. And he's like, you know what? He goes, I will get that fixed for you. And he said, you bring your buyer back and I'll have it fixed by tomorrow. And they fixed it for me. Now, whether the co-op agent did that on his own or his bank had, you know, give him a certain dollar amount to make any needed repairs, I don't know. But I've never had that happen since. But that I have had it happen once or twice where something will get done for you. But don't expect it, and don't tell your buyer that's even a possibility. Like, I don't even tell them that's an option. Until it happens, then I'm like, yay, look what I did. Yeah. The only thing that you and your buyer have control of during this process is the price that you offer, the timing of the sale, and then whether or not you accept any offer or counter offer that they make. And pretty much they write the rest of the rules. You're playing their game. So if you're looking to control and manhandle a deal, this is not it. Okay, you're gonna have to just figure out the process and adhere to that process and manage it the best that you can. It's the best way I can put it for you.
Because anybody you talk to, the agents that have listed that, they have to follow the rules step by step, like she said, putting in even a contract in a certain order. I mean, you just can't do anything about it. You have to know they're in charge.
Yeah, definitely. Some foreclosure agents might actually be on your side. So again, if you're nice and you do have the luxury of speaking to one before you make an offer, sometimes they'll tell you what didn't work before. Like, hey, you're making me an offer, don't go under this, because the bank will just say no, right? And if you're about to write up that'll just save you and your buyers some time. They're not telling you that because they want to make more money or they're looking out for the bank. They're looking out for themselves because they don't want to do the work either, right? They don't want to have to submit it in. So if they're giving you a bottom line of what the bank's kind of tolerance levels are, listen, and be thankful for the advice. Don't think there's a deeper meaning behind it. It's just them trying to help you. Every once in a great while, if you have a smaller bank or foreclosure process where it's not 100% automated, sometimes that listing agent does have a voice conversation with an asset manager or the bank themselves directly. There's a couple of local banks that do their own foreclosures and there's local agents involved, so there's more of a touchy-feely conversation that happens. So sometimes they can be persuaded if you help that agent with your case. I had a foreclosure a few years ago. It was a house in a subdivision where not a lot of things had sold. We went in with a certain price. The bank didn't like it. They kept coming, back to full price and back to full price. They would hardly deal at all. And this was on a couple $100,000 house. We were just frustrated, and I had found 2 foreclosures of the exact same floor plan in a subdivision about 2 miles away that had sold for our price. And I told the listing agent, I said, I know you probably don't care, but here's what I found. Does this help you? And he's like, oh my God, yes, that helps me. Will you send that to me? Show me whatever it is. He was a Kansas agent, so he wasn't as familiar with what builders built in what subdivisions. And he's like, if you could send me that, that would be great. I'm totally going to give this to the asset manager. Next thing you know, our offer gets accepted, right? So I would have never thought that sending a bank comps would have ever worked, but in that situation it did. So again, just being nice and keeping a dialogue. When you have open lines of communication, you just never know what you will get. Closing will always be typically at their title company, unless your buyer pays for their own title insurance and has a separate closer. Or sometimes they will send a witness closer, depending on who the title company is. Lenders must have docs into the title company 48 hours in advance of the closing. So that means your lender cannot be lazy and send everything the day of close. The foreclosure bank wants to look at their HUD statement, see the lender charges, their charges, and the bottom line, and make sure that matches what they anticipated when they accepted the offer. And they need 48 hours to make that happen. So make sure your bank knows that. Keys are generally okay to give at close, but ask the listing agent first. Every once in a while, you'll still run into some that will want to hold those keys until everything is completed, recorded, money is funded, and then they'll tell you where they're either hidden or you can pick them up. But again, that's just a conversation that you have with the agent right prior to close. And I do recommend you do a walkthrough with your buyers, the night before, the morning of the close, just to make sure there hasn't been theft or some other problem that has altered the condition of the property.
What do you do?
And then you call the listing agent right away and say, like for instance, the copper has just been stolen out of the house. We're not closing, guess what? Discount. So,
And that's usually what they'll do,
Yeah.
even the big banks, because it's just part of it.
right, because they're going to put it back in the market and then get degraded further. So generally that can be somewhat worked out, but yeah, something happens like that. They have insurance.
Will
for
they
that
do
stuff.
it then? Will they do it the day of closing or?
That closing would
extend the
be-
closing?
It's going to get delayed.
Um,
Yeah, it's going to get delayed.
Yeah, you do amendment right then, and
If it's minor enough that your buyer just wants to close anyway, I guess it's okay. Like if it's just like a broken window or, something that is not detrimental to anything, I think that's fine. But if it's big ticket item or roof has collapsed, tree on the house, water pipe broke, you know,
Tornado.
tornado, fire, yeah. There's all kinds of
Half
things that
gone.
can happen.
Things happen.
Okay, we already talked
I'm
about
sure
buyers
that-
should rekey the locks, because you just never know who changed them. Make sure padlocks are off garage doors for your buyers, because many times the bank will padlock those just so that if a prior owner, I should say, comes and tries the garage door, it won't open. So HUD homes, I just got yelled at by someone for having a set of HUD keys.
Oh,
Have they changed policies?
we don't have keys anymore.
Okay. Well, I used them to get a padlock off.
Oh.
And so when the listing agent said, yeah, I'm gonna come over and get the padlocks, I said, oh, I saw you took them off. How did you do that? I said, well, I said I had keys. I mean, I had them for years. And he's like, well, did you list HUD properties? And I said, no. I said, for going to a seminar and you get your HUD keys and the padlock keys. And then he bit my head off and told me I was breaking the law. And I was like, what do you know? So
Didn't get the memo.
Well, they said we
I
were gonna
didn't get
have,
the memo.
no, they said we were gonna have like 15 keys, remember at that point?
Yeah, I had that full set.
Oh, but then I think they did nothing with it, and all of a sudden now it's just combos.
It's just whatever, yeah. Well, I know they have the combos, and a lot of them require eye boxes on HUD, but the key master is still, it
I threw
still
mine
works.
away.
No, it still works, because if they leave a padlock on a shed and the listing agent can get it, then your buyer has to cut it off. So, anyway, I have said HUD keys for
And I have, if it's a Fannie Mae that, you need to get a padlock off, I have those keys, I keep them.
yeah.
But HUD I didn't, and, but it's funny because you do have to just have your buyer cut them off.
Yeah, so just be prepared for stuff like that. All right, close the deal. Okay, now we're going to, the short sale is much quicker. We're gonna go through this very quickly.
So close the deal and find a good therapist.
That's right.
It's really very easy. That once you get used to one,
You
you
know,
get
after-
nervous at first, but
Yeah, 2 or 3, and I think, those of us that have been in the business for longer than 5 years cut our teeth with the banks learning how to sell a foreclosure, because I don't think they really knew either. And so there was a lot of frustration. Like, I remember waiting up to 3 weeks to get a response on an offer, delays on their part because they didn't have title work in order to close. I remember a seller or buyer I was working with was getting married, and they were trying to get the house prior to this wedding date, and they couldn't clear the title. I don't remember what was stuck on it, and it took 75 days for the bank to clear this title and went past their wedding date. And oh my gosh, that buyer was a mess. In fact, she wouldn't talk to me after.
But I think it's ridiculous to have to wait so long to get a response. I mean, like right now, I have an offer in on a short sale. And that was put in last week. And the agent hasn't called me or anything. I mean, I would think they would call and say, okay, well, I haven't heard from the bank, or I don't know what, something. How long I get by, kiss my foot, something.
Well, we're going to talk about that right
But
now.
they haven't even returned my phone call. It's like, I sent you an offer, okay. So, it's like nothing for a whole week.
All right, we'll talk about that. So, short sales. Let me preference for those of you that might be slightly newer in the room what that is. So what that means is you're upside down, like in a car, but it's just your house. So you owe more money on the home, or it would cost more money than you could reasonably sell the house for in order to sell it. So let's say your house is worth $150, you owe $140. By the time you pay commissions, closing costs to the buyer, you do a few things, pay for title work, pay your taxes, catch up the last. You have to be distressed, by the way, to do a short sale. Catch up payments. You're going to be coming out of pocket. If you have funds to be able to do that, that is called a shortfall. So in the situation where I have, just an average seller that's just looking to get out of the home because they got transferred to Colorado, they owe $140, the house is only can be sold for $150, they may have to pay $4 or $5 grand at the closing table in order to seal the deal. They're willing to do that because they need to move on. That's not a short sale in the negative connotation. That is called a shortfall. So if you see shortfall in the MLS, that's what that means. I don't use the term shortfall when that happens to me. I say seller will be bringing money to close, because there are agents out there that will search for short or eliminate short in the remark search, and I don't want my seller to be eliminated because they think it's a true short sale, so I don't use the word short. It is your responsibility as a listing agent to disclose, even if the seller is bringing money to the table, there needs to be disclosure to the buyer and the buyer's agent that that is the case. All right, so in the situation where you have a distressed seller that cannot make their payments, there must be some sort of an event. So there has to be a documented loss of income, a death, a medical issue, an emotional issue, something has had, divorce, something has had to happen that will cause this person to be able no longer to make those payments on the home. If that is the case, the bank may forgive that person the part that they're short, in order to complete the sale of the home so that they don't have to spend money to execute the foreclosure process. For most banks, that is a $40,000 to $50,000 process. So if the short, by the time it's all said and done, so if they can forgive a seller 10, 20, 30 grand on the balance of their home because of loss of value and dilapidation, because what happens is when people start to get behind or they have this crazy thing happen to them, they just stop maintaining the home. There's a mentality that kind of happens to people like that. And it happens not just with homes, but whenever you can't pay your bills. I mean, has anybody been at a time like that in their life where things are stressy financially, and oh my God, how am I gonna make that payment? How am I gonna do this thing? And when that stress hits you, you just don't think straight, and people might be standing right next to you going, here, I'll help you. I can make this better, but you're so scared to take a step forward that they just don't take action. And so that's the mentality of what you're dealing with here on the short sale side of this fence. If you deem that that seller is a candidate for a short sale, and the bank may likely work with them in order to short sell the house and forgive the mortgage balance, then you've got a legitimate short sale. So now here's what's happening. Your buyer is now making the offer on this house. The listing agent should be presenting that offer to the seller, to the owner on deed of the home. The seller signs the contract, and probably will, and you can probably write it for just about anything you want, and the seller will sign it. However, there is a strategy to not lowballing it, because a listing agent that knows what they're doing knows that a bank will not take a lowball offer. They'll always go, well, could we get this much for it? So, for example, let's say I've got that $150,000 house, and the agent started at $155,000. You come in and make the offer at $130,000. Now, will the seller who's distressed owning the home want to sign that offer? Sure, right? Because they just need to get an offer to see if the bank will give them a forgiveness of debt. Will the bank be willing to come down 25 grand just like that? Probably not, because their response is going to be, well, great. Could we sell it for 140? Like save ourselves 15 grand? Like what if we priced it at 140? So what you want to look for in the history of the MLS, if you've got a short sale that's been on the market a very short time, you're not going to be, you can still ask for a discount, but don't over ask. And I don't know what that, I can't quantify that for you. I don't know if that means 5%, 10%, 10 grand, 5 grand. I don't know what that means. It's a feeling. But don't get over aggressive, because a listing agent may not be able to support your price. What you want to see is they started at 155, 2 weeks later or 30 days later they went down to 150. Couple weeks after that they went down to 157.5. Then they went down to 155. Then they went down, or I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong way. 47, 45, 142. And you're starting to see this price start to walk down. Now that you're here, you might be able to get that 130 in, because there's evidence that people aren't taking it for a higher price. Now the bank may still counter you at the end of the day. Seller's still going to sign it. They don't care. It's not the money anymore. I mean, it is, but it's not. And the listing agent may just want to get something presented and get the process started with the bank. So let's say you wrote the offer for this 142, and the seller signs it. You have an executed deal. It should go either on backup status or pending in MLS, depending on what the listing agent wants and what the seller wants. At that time, you have a legitimate bona fide offer. You're tied in and they're tied into you. it is contingent upon the lien holder, which is generally your mortgage company, of the seller approving your deal, because they're ultimately are the ones taking the loss. So you have a bona fide contract contingent upon the bank saying yes. Make sense? Have I lost anyone? Okay. Now, what does it take to get them to say yes? The seller has to be under distress. Okay, they can't be pulling in, 7 figures and ask for 50 grand loss. Okay, the bank's gonna say no. All right, so we need to be able to demonstrate that there's a loss. So here's the divorce decree, here's the death certificate, here's the bad thing that happened in the hospital, here's, whatever it is, some kind of trauma. They're gonna pull the seller's bank statements, tax records. They're gonna look at cash on hand, they're going to look at assets, they're gonna look at debt, they're gonna look at credit card payments, they're gonna look at their lifestyle, they're gonna see where do they spend their money. I was listening to Gayla the other day do an interview with a new short sale person. I mean, she was going through, how much do you spend on birthday gifts? How much do you spend on gas? How much do you spend on childcare? How much do you spend on gifts? How much do you spend on toiletries? I mean, literally, she was doing a budget for every penny of their income. If there is evidence that they are upside down, they can no longer afford the payments, then the bank will take it to the next level. I kind of call that level 1. Bank will take it to the next level. And then they will do an evaluation on the price of the home. So they'll probably send an appraiser out. They may get a broker price opinion, which is hiring agents to give them an opinion who aren't involved in the transaction. And then they'll look at the seller's information, their financial status. They'll look at the appraisal of the home, the value of what it should be, and the condition and anything that's wrong with it. Any dilapidation that is, the roof is bad, or they haven't painted it for 10 years, the air conditioner shot, whatever's wrong, they'll make a list. And then they'll decide, okay, is the debt between what it's really worth and what the seller owes worth the loss in order just to get this done and move on? If it is, that's level 2, and then it goes to Ivory Tower. And the Ivory Tower puts the stamp of approval on it. So what's legitimately happening is that while your buyer, when you've made the offer on this home, is qualifying with their lender and providing tax statements and bank statements, and here's maybe with my money, and here's how much I make, the seller is dequalifying at the same time. And because there's thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on the line, the bank is wanting to make sure that they're not giving a free pass to somebody that has the money under the mattress. So they're gonna look really, really careful. It's going to be like a private eye investigation. It takes time. Most short sales have probably an average contract written to contract close life of 120 days on average. It can go 6 to 8 months. You could get it done in 30 to 60 days. Every transaction is going to be completely different. So your buyer needs to be bought in that this is a process. It's not going to take, we're not going to get an answer right away. Now, on your situation, listing agent should be presenting that offer. That part should be done. So I would call that listing agent and just say, hey, we submitted an offer. I haven't gotten any response or signature, right? That's what you're saying? 3 times, right? And if you can't get a response, call broker. Call his broker and just say, hey, I can't get a response out of agent ABC.
Well, I think he's the broker in this particular situation. I think he's on a little.
Then I would get Bill involved. Because you have legitimately presented an offer and cannot get a hold of the agent and or the broker, get Bill to help you with that. Okay, that's what he's here for. Okay, so don't feel bad. Yes.
Can you clarify something for me? I do admit, I believe it was on 60 Minutes when they were in the big foreclosure crisis.
Okay.
And then, the people were just stopped paying their mortgage because they were so upside down in their house.
Okay.
I mean, when is it more beneficial for them to do a short sale as opposed to just say, screw it and just walk away?
Sure. Well, what a short sale will do for a seller is it will protect their credit if that's possible. It's the credit score is going to take less of a hit doing a short sale. I mean, it's going to take a hit, don't get me wrong, but it's going to take less of a hit doing a short sale than doing a foreclosure. If you have had a foreclosure, I believe it's 5 to 7 years to requalify to purchase another home. At the short sale, it's 2 to 3, depending on the type of loan that you're doing. I also expect that short sale sufferers, people that have been through it, as we progress away from those times, lenders, I think, to get those people back into the home game and accelerate the market again, I believe we'll start to see further sympathy towards people that have gone through a short sale. I think you're going to see like maybe a shorter time period and/or I bet there's going to be like money requirements and larger down payments, but I think you're going to see credit scores altered because I think it was something that so many people suffered through. That's just off the cuff, and you're already starting to see that with I think 6 months ago they lessened the short sale impact on being able to get a new mortgage, because I just had a couple that in the Detroit area where values just bottomed, and he got transferred down here and they really didn't have any choice, couldn't sell the home, they had to short sell. And then as soon as that 2-year anniversary hit for them, for the type of loan they were doing and the money down that they had, they were able to repurchase, so just closed them. Yeah.
I had a thing last week. So we went and looked at the house. Everything was fine. We put the offer in. The agent, when I called him and said, I'm sending this offer over, he said, well, good, I think it'll keep us out of short sale. And then when he called me back the next day, he said, I'm sending the offer back signed with the short sale addendum, because really, she'll go into short sale. And I thought,
Remember a couple grand or?
well, it was like 5. Yeah, and he thought it would work out because it looked like $1,000 on paper to him, but once he called the bank, because of all the fees
Escrow.
and everything, it came up to $5,000, and this lady doesn't have anything.
Gotcha.
Well, my clients, we didn't sign the short sale addendum, and then we just went ahead and sent in a cancellation. There was no earnest money or anything, because it went, it was just kind of a surprise to me, because it was like it wasn't going to be a short sale, and then all of a sudden he sent back the executed contract plus the short sale addendum that his client signed, and we were all kind of like, whoa.
Well, and you don't really have an executed contract, because it says in the contract that until all disclosures, addendums, and everything is signed, you do not have an executed deal.
Yeah.
So if you were missing an initial on a seller's disclosure, guess what? Your contract technically isn't valid to make sure everything's signed. That's strange.
Yeah, and so, of course, the kids wanted out of it, but then everything we're looking at is short sales now, everything. And it's like, we're just getting back in the same thing.
Right.
That one might have been better because she was only off $5,000.
I don't think it has anything to do with the timing. They're still gonna go in there and make sure she doesn't have $5 grand. 'Cause I bet you've got a seller that has a better likelihood of having $5 grand stuck away than you do of somebody having 20 grand stuck away. So, and I've had a buyer on a deal where the seller in the transaction was required to bring $8,000 to the table.
Oh.
They found the money. Like wherever he had it hidden or whatever assets he had, they found an account and said, guess what, we'll do the short sale and we'll forgive you the 20 whatever it was, but you will get to pay us 8 for the privilege. And he paid it. I mean, it's still the lesser of all the
The offshore
evils.
account in the Bahamas.
Yeah, exactly right. So yes, but that's why the banks take this really seriously, and that's why it just takes so darn long. So just prep your buyers. And here's the thing, because it's not fair. It's not fair to the seller. If you make an offer on a short sale and tell your buyer, oh, you can cancel after 30 days, because there is an addendum that you will sign that says that you promised to stick with the deal for so long, and if you don't hear anything, your buyers can walk away. Okay? I think 60 days is a fair number, because this listing agent should be able to at least get a peep out of somebody in 60 days. Doesn't mean it's going to close in 60 days, but we're just talking about, can we get a response from the bank? Okay, so here's my attitude, is that the seller is risking their foreclosure credit life on the fact that your buyer signed a piece of paper that they're willing to buy the house and wait for the sale. Now, if it goes 6, 8, 10 months, that's not fair to the buyer either. So I'm not advocating that buyers should just take it, right? But I'm just saying prep them. Because if your buyer writes an offer and 30 days, and you put in a 30-day window and they break back out at day 31, that seller was banking on your buyer buying the house. Now they're not. And the listing agent may not be able to stop the foreclosure. So make sure that your buyers are in it for the long haul and explain that to them. Like, hey, these sellers are banking on you to close this deal. You know, if this is a good deal, and it probably is. I mean, I've never sold a short sale that was a bad deal. Like, there's always equity in there. It's always a good deal for the buyer. And a lot of times it's the best deal that's out there. In fact, I'm even trying to get some of my investors into, if they can tie up their funds, or at least the promise of their funds, these are some of the best deals out there right now as far as equity versus market. You just gotta suffer through it, right? The inconvenience of getting a great deal, right, is all this stuff. So just be very, forthright and just honest with them and say, I don't know how long this is gonna take. And there's nothing that you or I, or maybe even the listing agent can do to make this go faster. So don't call me every day and go, didn't hear anything? Did we hear anything? It's not like I'm gonna hear something and not call you. Like sometimes I think that's what buyers think. They think I've got the pocket answer in my pocket. I'm just gonna wait a couple of days and then give them a call, right? So I'm saying, yes, of course, check in with me. I'll check in with you. I will check in with the listing agent. But you start badgering that poor little listing agent every single day for the rest of their life until the deal closes, they're gonna hate you. They're not gonna like you. So just take a pill and just accept a weekly update or a bi-weekly update even is probably okay, especially at the very beginning. As things progress, you're gonna start to get more communication from the listing agent and things are gonna start to go faster. And it usually sounds like this. The bank said they take the deal, but they're not paying for the home warranty and they'll only do $2,000 on the closing costs, and we need you to sign that amendment and it has to be in by midnight tonight or else we lose the deal. Like, see, you're waiting for months. And then all of a sudden something happens and the bank wants you to move right now or you're gonna lose the deal, okay? Just be prepared, okay? So make sure your buyers are fluid, that they're, they can come sign something or, ask the listing agent, is a digital signature okay on this particular form if your buyers are traveling or anything like that, okay? Just be prepared.
Now, Carolyn?
Yes.
I have a situation where I've got some friends that are going through a divorce, so they can't make their payments anymore.
Okay.
At what point or how long down the road does the short sale become just out of the question?
Once the courthouse sale has completed. I mean.
So as long as it has not been foreclosed on?
As long as it hasn't physically been foreclosed on, you can still get up in the business and stop it. Now, if there is a court date for that foreclosure sale to happen, sometimes it's harder to get it stopped, but it can be done. But if you're talking about you find out the night before the sale that you've got a seller that's going to be pretty tough. You don't almost have enough time to try to stop it. But if you've at least got a couple of weeks, sometimes a couple of weeks is enough to get a buyer on the hook. And if you got a buyer on the hook, then you can at least stop the sale until cooler heads can prevail and you can sort everything out. And at least if you get the bank to say stop. Also know this: when short sale listing agents send this paperwork over that they have an offer, the first thing that generally is going to happen is they're going to want the seller to go through a loan modification process to see if they can't just lower the payment to a place where the seller doesn't have to sell their home. And that can also get in the way of the timing because that might take 2 to 4 weeks to get that process done before the bank will even enter into the short sale process. A good seasoned listing agent that knows what they're doing with short sales will have that done or at least really well started before the house even hits the market. So they're going to do all of that preliminary paperwork, do what they can to get the house cleaned and staged if possible, and then that's already half done so you, the buyer, and the buyer's agent aren't having to wade through that. But they always want to put people through loan mod first. There are ways around it, you just have to know how to do it. That's not my specialty. I chose several years ago that I made a conscious decision. I'm not listing short sales. I will find people and refer them. So that is what I do. There's 4 or 5 rock star listing agents in this building that do short sales. Get a referral from somebody in the office that knows and go refer them and just collect your check. It's easier. It's like
can you give me their names after our session?
I will.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Do a good walkthrough of the home with buyers the day before you make an offer, and take a seller's disclosure with you as available. You will have disclosures, that's good. consult with buyers about inspections, and here's the choice that they have. With the short sale, on that addendum, it's going to say that the buyer can either do inspections like normal within the first 10 days of the contract, or they can wait for the bank to say yes and then do their inspections. So I just had this come up where we wrote the offer in February. I got approval in June. We did inspections on June 10th, you know, everything was fine. We did have a couple little things, and it turned out that the sellers of the home were willing to fix a couple little things. That was amazing, like that doesn't normally happen. But if the sellers aren't making their house payment, there's a chance that they still have some extra funds to help out here or there with the deal. I've also had a short sale seller do a roof insurance claim when the roof ended up being trashed because of hail. And they had enough money to put down the down payment or the deductible on their homeowner's insurance, and it worked out. Sometimes the bank, if they're aware of that stuff, their bank will actually allow them to contribute or will give them, it's called cash for keys. Sometimes they will just give them the money to get out and move on and do what they need to do in order to close the sale. Sometimes the banks will do winterization for them. Again, it depends on the lender, depends on the listing agent, depends on a lot of things, but these are possibilities. But when you're coaching your buyers, just coach them that the sellers will not be able to fix anything, they'll not be able to do anything. You are pretty much getting an as-is property, and then if you can work it out later, if there is a big tragedy, awesome, you're the hero, but don't prep them with, yeah, we can totally give a list of things to the seller. If it's minor, they might be able to comply, or you'll just buy the properties knowing you're getting a good deal. All right. Why the buyer might want to do inspections up front like normal is because then they know what they're buying. They know what they're waiting for. Okay? Why that might be bad is because you might make the offer of 142 and the bank says no. They want to sell it for 150. And if the buyer doesn't want to buy it for 150 because that's not good enough of a deal for them, then they will have the ability to walk away. They don't have to accept the bank's counter, but they will have spent their inspection money to do that inspection up front, so that's money they're going to lose. It depends on the personality of the buyer. I've had buyers go both ways on this. I think it depends on their personality and what they feel good about. I would say more often than not, the buyer waits until the bank says yes to the price or a price that they all agree to before they do inspections. But I've also had that bite a buyer when something horrible had happened and they waited all of this time and here's this big huge problem that we can't overcome. So I think either way, it's just, here's the deal. As agents, it's not your responsibility to make those decisions. It's your responsibility to coach the buyer. Here's what is good and here's what's bad. If you make this decision, here's what's good and here's what's bad. If you make that decision, what decision would you like to make? Right? And then you go fight for that. Like a lot of times in other coaching I've said, when you're negotiating, like, Mr. Buyer, I know how to use a sword, okay? I'm very good at it. But sometimes I need you to give me the advice of how you want me to hold it, right? So do you want me to get in there and get those inspections done for you, or do you want to make sure we get the right price? How do you want me to act on your behalf, right? So that's, again, don't put yourself in the driver's seat of those decisions, because if you do it and then you make the wrong decision, that buyer's going to be mad at you. All right, make sure your buyer's lender knows you're doing short sale, okay, so that they can hold the appraisal order. Because typically they're not going to want to do an appraisal until the bank has agreed to a final price. Because a lot of times when you make these offers, the bank is going to counter you. They don't usually counter you very much, but there's always a little nickel and diming that happens on these deals. Some listing agents will just tell you the rules up front. Okay, there's one in particular that knows if the loan that the seller has is FHA, or if it's conventional, or if it's with this bank, or if it's with that bank. They've done so many short sales that they will actually tell you, okay, this is a Bank of America, Fannie Mae, blah, blah, blah. So that means that you're only going to get $1,000 worth of buyer's cost. You're not going to pay for a home warranty, and don't be bringing me an offer that's below blah, 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 because they've already done an appraisal, and they'll only accept 80-some% of whatever value that appraisal is. and that's after expenses. You know who I just did? She knows who I just did. But here's the deal, is that, okay, I probably didn't understand half of that the first time I got those instructions. However, he's telling me how to write the offer so that it will get accepted, right? He's not being a jerk. He's not, trying to tell me my business. He's not looking out for the seller's best interest because of the dollar amounts. He's doing it to get the deal closed. And this is what the rules are at the bank, just like the foreclosure agent who knows what that foreclosure bank is going to do. A seasoned listing agent with a short sale is going to have that same rhythm to them. So it's going to feel the same. Listen to what they have to say. Ask questions if you're confused. Okay, you'll get it. You get it
So he pulled a Jerry Maguire on you. Help me help you.
Right. Exactly. He's just like that too. But but I've done enough deals with him that I like. Okay, I get it. I understand what he's saying.
Let's not waste any time here. This is where you need to be.
He's very direct. Very
This is where
direct
you need to
person.
be. If you're not here, don't even waste my time.
That's correct.
Right.
Right.
Or waste your own time.
That is correct.
I mean,
Right,
it's
exactly.
And that is even more
everybody's.
important.
Yeah.
Now, this just happened with him. This is the one that we just did in February. We had the offer in February. You take a snapshot of the market. This is where the home values are, and it's in a 10-year-old subdivision. A lot of cookie cutter, plans. May comes around, the market accelerates. He had walked the price down, like it had started. It had started in the 170 mark, 165, 162, 160, 160 or 50. I don't know why I keep doing that. 157, right? It was like all the way down. We were at 150 list price. So I tell my buyer, look, this has been on the market for months. Nothing's happened. Let's get aggressive. Let's write it in at 140. I call the listing agent and I say, hey, I'm gonna get aggressive. Are you okay with that? And he's like, yep, that's fine as long as you know the bank might come back. I said, no, I get it. We're cool. We've done a lot of deals together. So but let's try it and see what happens. He's like, great. He's like, I'm just excited to get something on this. I can't believe this house hasn't sold. Okay, great. So we wait about 4 months, and then we get the response from the bank. 162 is the price. 162. And the reason is because what had been a 150 to 160 market has now accelerated, and just like kind houses, even short sales are closing in the 160s to 170s now. And the bank was holding on to it like nobody's business. And so I had to come back to my buyer and go, oh, okay, great, here's what just happened. So what do you want to do? And they're like, well, that's, they were very upset. I call the listing agent and I say, I don't know if I can keep them on the board. This is just it's a huge jump. I almost regret that I got aggressive with them because I think I created a false expectation. And he said, you know what, just counter. He goes, I know what the market was. I walked that price down. I did everything I was supposed to do. I'm willing to fight. And I was like, okay. So I don't remember what we countered with, somewhere in the 150s. We eventually got it down to 158. So we were able to kind of yank a little here and there, and we got him to 158. Then the appraiser for our bank looked at my original contract price of 142 instead of the amendment and appraised the property for 142.
Oh.
I just told that story last week in class if you were here. So anyway, I got it. But it was a weird conversation. I called my buyer and it was like, okay, now that we've accepted this one type, I don't remember what it was, like 158, the appraisal came in at 142, and I guarantee you this is why. What I'm going to need to do here is go fight to get the value up. Are you going to be okay with that so we can close this deal? The other thing that happened was because of the enormous jump in price, the seller actually offered to pay more of the buyer's closing costs where the bank wouldn't do it because they did have the cash funds to help them, and the bank wouldn't let them. their bank would not let them bring their own money to close to help us close the deal because they felt so bad for the buyer. So so the agent came to me and said, what can we do for you? Like, what needs to be done to the house? Because the seller can do anything they want to the house, they still own it. So what needs to be done? And I'm like, I don't know, let me call. So I'm like, what do you want done? And they're like, how about a full paint on the inside? So I'm like, okay, great. So they had a $2,000 allowance. That was kind of off the chart, but they came in and painted for them. And so fortunately, because that had happened, the appraiser had not seen the house before the paint. So he was able to save face by saying, oh, well, now all this painting's been done. And he did admit to making a mistake. And eventually we got the appraisal to come in. But it was the hardest transaction. My poor little buyers were just all over the place emotionally. And we even did go back out and look at property, because I said, before you accept that 158, even when it came back in at 162, I'm like, according to the resales, that's still not a horrible deal. Is it the best deal possible for waiting 4 months for a short sale? No, but 162 in a neighborhood that's selling for 165 to 170 still isn't overpaying. But let's make sure there's nothing else out there that isn't better. So we went and looked at every house that was available in the criteria between 155 and 165. They couldn't find anything they liked better. So then they were okay with it. I mean, they just, and that's what we did. So, whew, that was a lot. Are you guys tired? Because I'm tired telling the story. All right, rate locks. That came into play on that particular situation as well. That the lender did not want to lock that rate when we turned in the contract in February and hold that rate all the way till the day that the deal closes. And so when we got the short sale approval from the bank, that's when then my buyer's bank did a rate lock, okay? So if your buyer is very budgeted to a certain payment amount, short sale may not be for them if a difference in, 0.25% on the interest rate is going to make a difference to them, or the interest rates go up. So just be prepared for that. But you can't lock rates. If you do, it's going to cost the buyer to extend the rate locks, and sometimes it's just not worth it. So you're going to have the same issues with utilities as short sale as the foreclosures. Sometimes sellers will go under, because they can't make payments, they've lost a job, they can't keep up the water bill, they can't keep up the gas bill, and things will get shut off. So when it comes down to time to do, inspections and appraisals, you're not going to have utilities. So just, again, that's just a conversation that you and the listing agent need to be having about the sellers. If they're still living in the property, you have less likelihood of having failure. But even then, a seller can move out suddenly and stop paying gas bill or something, and the heat kicks off, and that it's not winterized, and that's what's happened to me in the past. Use the KCRR understanding short sales and short sale addendums. We already talked about the inspection timing, that you have options. Winterization and utilities. So the short sale that I did where the sellers moved out and the gas was shut off and the pipes froze, we found out when we did inspections. Turned everything on, and then, yeah, it was quite a mess. Buyers walked away from that deal. 9 months later, I guess they had to sign a new lease, so they did another year lease. They make another offer on another short sale, and the seller was in the process of moving out, so they asked to pay for the utilities to keep them in their name. And I'm like, just have the utilities shut off in winter. I pay to winterize, that'll be cheaper. And they're like, no, because then we do inspections or appraisal, and we said, we would just rather pay them. It's going to be minimal anyway. And so I'm like, all right, so I called the listing agent. Here's what the buyers want, or is the seller okay with that? Yeah, they were fine. Yeah, no problem. So that's what happened. So nowadays, that was probably 6 years ago. Some municipalities, unless the buyer has their name on a deed, will not turn the water on or utilities on to someone whose name is not on the deed. And speaking as a city, that is true. So that makes it a little more difficult. Appliances. Sometimes sellers will come back in and grab that stuff. So just be careful with the buyer. If the seller is living in the property, just know that the mentality, right, is depression, hysteria, the seller's going through some stuff. Things are not going to be maintained continuously, and some things may get damaged or dilapidated. So just prepare your buyer that, you know, we want it to look like the same thing we looked at when we made the offer to the day we close, but the seller.
Like it comes with a fridge, but it's a different fridge.
Yes, it could be a different fridge. Again,
Well, on the
there's
seller's
people.
disclosure form, don't they have to list the things that are staying and not
Yes,
staying?
but I'm just saying, these people aren't right in the head sometimes.
So just because they write down that it's staying doesn't mean it'll be there when you get there.
Right, yes.
Okay.
I was a witness with someone in the office who had a short sale, who the seller absolutely, day of closing, they had built a new home, it went under on it, so the appliances and everything were like 3 years old. And they decided, you know what, we paid for all of this out of our own pocket because they upgraded, and so we're taking it. And so the buyer comes to do the walkthrough 2 hours before it closed. All of the appliances were gone. They took garage door openers. They took anything that could be disassembled from the property, and just completely screwed the sale and screwed themselves in the process because they had a court date for foreclosure. And when the buyer stalled out at completing the deal, it screwed up their ability to stop the foreclosure. So I don't remember exactly how it all went down. I don't think that buyer closed it. She might have been able to get it back on the market for somebody else. But yeah, it was a big mess. All right, 60 to 180 days are going to be your average. I did last year wait 1 year, 1 full year on a property, but that's rare. But it was an investor and he didn't care. So seller will not make repairs. Waiting feels like forever, and information during the wait period is really scarce. You're just not going to get a lot. Bank can still change terms. Closing date's a suggestion. Don't do a 30-day close. You're not going to write anything in the contract that's going to make the bank move faster, so just don't go there. Let's not do 5 amendments. Just make it a 90 to 120-day close, and just assume it, and then you can do an extension from there. You probably will anyway. Agents do not have any control. Only that seller's lender has control of this. Now, the listing agent can make your life easier or worse depending on their level of understanding short sales and how to work a bank in the process. You get a listing agent that doesn't know what they're doing, which is what I believed I was in the year wait. I don't think they were managing it. They were just sitting on it and not doing anything with it, and it was just, it was like pulling teeth to get information.
The house can really deteriorate in a year.
It can. And and those of us that are in gold, Diana Kokoska believes, and I do too. I mean, we all have an energy, around us, and structure can respond to that energy. And when it doesn't have that energy, it dilapidates faster than when somebody is living in it, just not taking care of it. I really believe that to be true. I see that with apartments when I was in property management. It's just crazy. Okay, close the deal. Questions? It sounded horrible. Well, I would rather go to the dentist sometimes. I think as the buyer's advocate, the reason you suffer through this is to get a great reward for the buyer. And to know that you are helping a seller, another person that is in some dire straits.
Years ago.
Yeah. Again, that was not a buyer that needed to move. That was an investor that wanted a house for rental, and he was very motivated to have it. So, it wasn't like he's on my case every, 2 weeks going, what's going on? It was kind of like once a month we check in, like, have you heard anything? No. Okay, well, just let me know. It's like, so it was all right. But when you are in an 8 to 9 month wait with a live buyer that needs the house, has a lease ending date, they do get a little antsy. And so you're just gonna have to speak to that. Again, just prepping up front, like, hey, I know you guys have a lease that's up in 6 months, and hopefully we'll know, but I want you to be prepared. We get in 120 days into this, and we are not getting solid information from the bank. You may need to do a month to month. You need to be prepared right now to take the extra expense to go month to month. You may need to be prepared to move in with mom and dad. You may need to be prepared to do something else. And just keep people prepped. And their choice may be not to do this. And that's okay. I would much rather know that before I write the offer than to wait 8 months and then have them back out. Because again, what a tragedy. It's a tragedy for everyone. So I'm not taking a wishy-washy buyer through this process. But that's why almost every single short sale I have ever written for a buyer has closed. Because it's all about setting expectations and making sure they understand the process. And if I do as good a job with them as I just did with you, do you feel like if you were a buyer signing a contract today, that you would have good knowledge about what you were getting into? Absolutely.